Saga. I am co-director, producer, cinematographer, host.
I am the piano. And death.
Since its conception in the late 1500s, opera has endured through the centuries as one of the world's most enthralling works of art. Combining the agility and fascinating color of the human voice, the beauty of poetry, the majesty of music, and the arts of dance, architecture, and theater all in one. Originally coming from a desire to combine music with Greek drama, operatic performances have taken many different forms throughout our history. From French grand operas of the Romance era to gritty Italian verismo, to American radio operas by Menotti in the early 1900s. Opera has spread from the Western world into the non-Western world, with each culture developing work that incorporates significant myths, historical figures, and expressions of national and religious pride. When one dives into the history of this incredibly versatile art form, it is evident that underneath the surface there is truly an opera that could suit any person's musical tastes and sensibilities.
Tell us about your character interpretation, or like your individual interpretation in the context of the overall interpretation of the show.
It's really just a human trying to get through it best they can, right? You can see them making decisions maybe not how we would hope ourselves to act, like especially in accordance with their girlfriend Amore in this case. So just seeing the struggle and trying to get through the day like any other human.
Well, at least for my expression of death, I tried just being still and just kind of just creeping. To be like, I'm here. Death was actually pretty simple. Contrary to how death is normally described, I just had to be there, moving. What I tried doing for the expression was really just trying to make different colors. Like I would hear some things for the orchestra, and I was like, okay, like that's how those instruments need to make some of those sounds. And sometimes, like you can imitate that on the piano, it sounds good. But there are other times it's like, this sounds kind of too cheesy or hokey for it. So I would tweak some other spots to try to just get like a different color, or you hit a note just a little bit stronger, it brings out a different melody that's in the texture.
I had a lot of fun kind of making Amore my own, and I had a lot of freedom over costuming, so I tried to pick out shirts that were more representative of like where she was at in her own journey, so I thought that was really fun.
As singers ourselves, we fell in love with this art form when we first began musical studies at the college level, and since then it has become one of the most important and enduring parts of our lives. Our endless fascination with its versatility and potential is what inspired us to create Opera Cecilia, a company that strives to break some of opera's unspoken rules and create new and innovative ways to produce it, in hopes of amassing more interest from the standard 21st century audience. In our current era of TikToks and Instagram Reels, Netflix and chill, and worshipped pop stars, it can be hard to see where opera could fit. It is our mission to find a happy middle ground where we preserve the integrity of this beautiful art form while also using it to spark important conversations and taking it to spaces it has rarely, if ever, been seen. In keeping with the key words of our company's mission, we strive to make opera more relevant, rousing, and real than ever.
Can you tell us a little bit about the very unique relationship your characters have in particular that we don't see in other iterations of this opera?
Usually if there's several love interests, it's really written into the music. But in this type of interpretation, we get a chance to create something tangible that wasn't there before and make you take another look at the music, take another look at what was written. It makes you appreciate different parts of it a lot more.
Yeah, I thought it was also interesting to have a love triangle where it wasn't just like a catfight with the two women. It was more deep and complex than that. And it's also really interesting for Amore because she's usually Cupid, literally Cupid, and she just flies in and says like, hey, what's up, you can go do this, flies out and doesn't come back until the third part of the opera. She's not in it for much. So in this, she got to be in it a lot more. And it was a really interesting take on her character.
It was interesting that Joanna got to experience building a character that's going through something that many other people have. Because she's not the first person to like maybe date a widower or get into a relationship when someone has passed, something very human. That hasn't really been seen in just the classical opera genre. Or Baroque or anything like that.
That's really true. I feel like that's something you don't see very often, is the perspective from the new partner of a widower.
and trying to support a person through their grieving process so that they're able to get to the next part of life.
Opera Cecilia's inaugural production of Orfeo and Euridice is a modernized retelling of the Greek myth of Orpheus, with music written in the late Baroque to early classical era by composer Christoph Willibald Gluck. This lush and beautiful score blends both timeless Baroque melodies and recitative with early signs of what the opera world would later hear in classical era works by Mozart and Haydn. In its traditional staging, this opera tells the story of Orfeo, who recently suffered the death of his beloved wife Euridice. Orfeo makes a deal with the cunning goddess Amore to retrieve Euridice from Elysium, traveling through the underworld to get to her. Amore agrees to the deal on one condition. When he brings her back, he is not allowed to look at her face or tell her why he is not. Since thankfully the traditional practice of castrati is no longer in style, today the character of Orfeo is often played by a mezzo-soprano. In keeping with our mission to find new and innovative ways to interpret timeless classics, our production of Orfeo follows Orfeo and their new lover Amore as they attempt to go on a road trip a year after Euridice's death. Fighting the guilt of moving on to a new relationship, Orfeo is plagued by visions of Euridice's ghost, a fantastical and conniving hallucination of their new lover Amore, and questions even their own mortality. Orfeo and Euridice turns into a harrowing story of having the courage to move on, making peace with the past, and the complexity of coping with grief. A story that emphasizes that love is love, and our collective humanity can be beautiful even during the difficult times. This production has molded itself lovingly into a story of growth even through loss, and the power of loving relationships.
Do you have kind of a distinction between your relationship with Euridice versus your relationship with Amore in the show?
Perceptions. One is like, here, this is real, this is happening. The other one is like, what could have been, what I wish, what I hope, and trying to make those two worlds match. I really enjoyed watching the arc that we created between the characters in the beginning, how it develops, and where they end up as a couple, when in the traditional sense it's only Euridice and Orfeo that are the couple.
What was one of the most challenging aspects to kind of having a dual identity, to your character slash the other characters having a dual identity in the show? This idea of imagination versus reality.
It seemed rather natural, to be honest. Not so much of a challenge as making somebody more complete. Every coin has two sides, every person has multiple facets, just made the character richer.
As a company made by performers and for performers, every single aspect of the production, from the accompaniment and musical direction to the singing to the filmography, was done by the work of passionate emerging artists, as we all learned how to grow in our skill sets together. In keeping with CDC guidelines, the virtual production was completed over the course of 6 months in a hybrid of digital and in-person rehearsals with social distancing, and filmed outdoors in the open air with a fully vaccinated cast and crew. We seek to be a part of this art form's resiliency, and we hope our production provides you a lovely escape and catharsis.
What unique challenge did you have to undertake as your part came to fruition for this opera?
As my part came to fruition for this opera, I actually underwent 2 losses, a friend and a family member. So going through what Orfeo has to say when they say it, and understanding exactly what the translation meant, took a completely different turn, and as I was able to interpret in a completely more real way.
For the piano part, because it's something called a piano reduction, they took a whole orchestra part and put it into the fingers, and sometimes they would put notes that were farther than your hands would be. So I actually couldn't play all the notes that were written on the page, so I had to do something called revoicing the chords, or just kind of tweaking it so that it sounded like that.
Primarily I come from a background of live performances, as most all of us. It was a very big challenge to undertake, taking it on a virtual scale and actually doing a legitimate movie angle for this. It was very fun, very rewarding, but very long, strenuous, lots of late nights and early mornings, getting everything done on time, sending everyone their recordings. Since we did everything, all the audio was pre-recorded, it was particularly difficult to get everything all lined up, and we were all in different states at the time that was happening before filming could happen. And then filming in general was a big challenge. We had done a prior project before in collaboration with University of Minnesota, and that was a very different animal because it was one location, and we only had to deal with 2 people's schedules instead of 5 households, 4 households.
Just getting to be with people for the first time in like a year.
It's accurate. I like seeing it, like introducing each other online and then starting to know each other in person, and then seeing where we creatively build this project together as artists. It's just like little layers at a time and you just appreciate it more.
As a singer, you miss working with people. A lot of singers are extroverts. That's how you go on a stage, is you're usually extroverted. And so we miss seeing people, we miss being with people. But it's still fun to realize that you can create art in different ways, and you can get wily about how you do things, because you know you have to in order for this art form to stay alive during the pandemic. You're gonna have to make some sacrifices. A good story has a good theme that you can put anywhere. Like, I feel like a lot of things are modernized just to be modernized, but there are these themes, like grief is a theme that was in old Greek theater that's still a theme today. There's classist themes, there's political themes, there's all these themes that kind of get like brushed over in opera, and so I feel like creating these new characters with this old work and putting it in this context is really showing like these themes are really pervasive today still.
Definitely. To be human is so many things. Take a risk. You don't have to make the cookies the same way each time. Throw something in, try something different. You might end up loving it.
What did you learn about this particular artistic format, doing an opera virtually, that you'll carry into future performances?
I wish I had as many chances to do a redo in live theater. Well, of course, with live opera, what you get is immediate feedback from your audience. You don't know how people are going to react to what scenes and what angles. With a theater, you're able to curate the experience in a very specific way. This is, we're doing our best to tell a great story.
When you're recording recitative, it's very funny because most of the time, like, you're following the text of someone speaking. And sometimes like there's little variations, not big ones, like we'll say it's like this big. But when you record it, instead of having that window for like little bits of variation, put it right there. So then your singer might actually be behind or ahead of what you record, or I might end up getting behind or ahead. It's just recording that. The big life lesson is medium. There's some things you can fix right when you're with someone because it's just easy to follow. If you're making a recording, fix it in post.
I learned that as much as I really love it, I don't like to be juggling too many things at once. So for this particular project, working full-time, doing this on the side, which in turn was a very substantial part-time job in and of itself, in addition to getting a new family member, a dog, in addition to a class that I'm taking, it's probably not a great idea to juggle so many balls. So in the future, I'll probably lighten my load a little bit so I can stay sane and sleep.
What makes you most excited about the mission behind Opera Cecilia, or Opera Cecilia in general as a company?
It's not just another company trying to do another opera thing. It actually is focused with trying to achieve socially as well as into the future for young artists and what we're experiencing as a society nowadays.
I'm really excited about finding new ways to modernize the opera industry and really bring in a new generation of individuals that will help the opera genre grow to the next level, because we have lived for so long in the classical way of interpreting things, the normal way, the way that honestly needs to evolve in so many ways. I'm just really thrilled and excited to be on the cusp of that and potentially be one of the voices that helps lead that.
What I'm most excited about for the mission of Opera Cecilia is, I'll say, a growing trend that I want to support of trying to make more inclusion, like really trying to create systems that account for as many different points of view as possible. Just because in older works, the points of view were only given by people that were in power. And now, people are trying to acquire power so that it can actually be shared, which is great. because that means you can get more voices heard, and usually the system ends up working a lot better for everyone else, and that power is being shared rather than isolated to just one person's point of view.
It takes a lot of discipline, a lot of organization, but mostly it takes initiative. You just got to start. It is what you could do in the moment, and you should be proud of the hard work that you put in. Definitely anything that you put out into the world, you should be happy to put your stamp on it, and we need people who put their stamps on things, because we are the future, and the next generation will look up to us, hopefully.
Welcome to Opera Cecilia, an innovative exploration into the wonders of the human voice.